I'm advocating broken league starts. I think it's a good thing.
I want players to lose their progress.
Quote.
Hey guys, Tarke here, and today we're going to be talking everything Ultimatum. Before we get into our league starts, just start off with streamer priority and bans to get it out of the way.
It makes a lot of sense for someone who is not involved within with PoE, within the actual league, someone who just needs to showcase and PR it. In that sense that you just want to push someone through to make sure they can see within a given time frame, that makes sense. But for anyone who is actually actively playing a league, there can be no advantage. Because it goes strictly against everything that they say in terms of pay to win as well. Right? Because it's just the extension of that. So it's like influence to win, you know, suck up to win, or whatever thing you can do to garner, you know, a slot to win. And that cannot become the meta ever. That's very dangerous. Because they strike down against this all over the place, and then all of a sudden they kind of introduce it. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, let's say Shroud was going to play it for like 1 or 2 days, and then he's going to bail out with his 30,000 people, and they're just kind of, you know, meme and stuff like that, and they just wanted to push them through to see the game, and there was like an allotted time slot and not like a full league engagement. Makes sense. But then make it very clear that these people are just here for promotional purposes, and they are not going to be part of the actual league.
The reality is that when it comes to Path of Exile, you know, if you've played the game for a long time, the longer you've played, the more knowledge you have, the more of an advantage you're going to have on league start. But you always see those people who are like, man, I'm just going to wait for the league to come out, and that's when I'm going to play. When is the best time to play Path of Exile? And the best time to play Path of Exile is always now. And I think preserving that kind of illusion of the fact that it truly is a fair start and everybody is on even ground, even though it really isn't there, but just having that mentality is what makes people come back to Path of Exile. So that fairness is like just so important on a league start. And yeah, I felt like they really dropped the ball on that.
Go on, Z, I saw you.
Oh, yeah, this is the part where we like vehemently denounce the entire thing, or people come for our asses, right?
Yeah.
I looked at the whole thing from the perspective of like, they want to make sure that people are streaming the game at league start, because there's like a bunch of people from outside the PoE community coming to look at the game on Twitch right now to see the new thing, and then they just see everyone in login queues. I was like, that's a bad look. So I was like, makes business sense for them, and it also makes sense for me to be like streaming and entertaining people. So that's why I stuck with the whole thing and just kept playing and kept streaming for people. So like, I feel like anyone thinks that I'm a threat in some sort of competitive PoE environment. So I didn't really like think about it from that perspective. But yeah, the whole thing is a mistake in the end, just because, obviously because it stirs up too much drama, but also because it does bring into question a lot of other things. And now I'm starting to wonder if there's streamer priority RNG and stuff like that. Although I feel like I don't have it.
I mean, realistically, this was like the worst league launch of all time, right? Like, there never really was anything that came close to this. There was that one league launch where they like restarted the league, but that was like 3 or 4 hours in. Well, there was also the issue of people like apparently generating items through duping and like the guild stash, which people were definitely linking around like stacks of exalted orbs.
Well, did you actually see any like evidence of that? Because I tried finding it and I couldn't find evidence of these like linked dupes.
People definitely linked me like a 10 exalt stack, and then they were saying that they're duping like thousands, which I don't know how true that is. But if you have 10 exalted orbs like a couple hours in, I mean, I don't know. That sort of speaks for itself, but not entirely. But I also think that, because I know that apparently Bex was going around asking for screenshots of that, which, yeah, I don't know how exactly they handle that, because they take duping very, very seriously. But then, in this case, I guess like only a couple people did it because it was so clearly an exploit. And those people probably, you know, got handled in a pretty extreme way. We just don't know about it.
I just, in terms of like the whole people will quit if there's like 3 hours in and not come back, I think people are way blowing that point out of proportion. There's like notion that we can't even, like, if it's 6 hours gone, the entire league is dead. Like the day after, 12 hours after, or 24, we had a new peak, right? Yes, it's a dip, and then we have this it's not a good outlook. It definitely discourages players for coming back again, but I don't know. I've seen, I don't know, dozens of league launches of MMOs, different games where the first 3 days are completely scuffed.
Yep.
And everyone's just sitting there, let me in, day number 2, let me in, day number 3. If there's enough hype and people want to play it, they want to play it. 12 hours is not the worst disaster in the world. In terms of like PoE launches, which you should be happy about, 12 hours is a lot in PoE retrospect, but in terms of like gaming overall, I mean, we've had it pretty good, I think, with servers and league launches.
No, I
know,
completely agree with that. Yeah. Okay.
I've one more thing that I kind of wanted to put
Go on.
forward to see if anyone else has noticed. But sorry.
That's all right.
But I don't think it's anything so dramatic as like the league launch day and things like that cause people, like tons of people, to quit and never come back or anything like that. But I've noticed a bit of a feeling, a vibe going around, if you will, that for people the first day kind of led to them not getting as invested as they usually do. And then there's like a slow roll-on effect where you didn't start out as invested, you don't kind of like get as sunk into the game, and that just kind of goes on, and the end result is a bunch of people not really getting kind of as into the game in general over time, and then kind of fading.
Well,
I
it
can
didn't
see
feel
that.
like
A lot of
much of
people
a
feeling that
reset,
way.
right? You just kind of went from ritual, which is like ultimatum. It, like for me, I'm definitely one of those people where basically feels like I got a fresh start SSF, but like the game, I'm enjoying it as much as I did in ritual, which fortunately for me, it was quite a lot. But I know that there's a lot of Redditors right now who are like, oh, I'm never playing again. Woo, they ruined the game. See you guys Friday, you know? And those guys, you know.
I think a large part of it as well. I mean, it's partially that ritual, or not ritual, ultimatum. I mean, I just confused the two names there. That ultimatum is not too much of a departure from a lot of other league mechanics we've seen, and most importantly, ritual, which is recent. But also that a lot of the other changes they made to existing systems, so things like, you know, new mods and buffs to Abyss Jewels, the changes to Ashling, and all the other betrayal stuff, you know, there's so many different little changes they made to all these different endgame systems that don't really matter unless you've got a character together and you're at like level 90 plus and you're trying to perfect some gear, or you're trying to grind some endgame stuff. Like all of that stuff is relevant maybe a week into the league for most players, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, depending on how slowly it takes you to get to maps and start caring about perfecting a piece of gear or upgrading your chest piece or whatever. So it feels really samey for that period of time where you're grinding the early atlas and getting through the story, because yeah, none of the bigger changes that were implemented in this league matter for that period of time. You don't care about the fact that you can get cooldown recovery on Abyss Jewels now, which is really cool for some niche builds, but it doesn't matter until you're planning your second build of the league, right? You don't care about the fact that you can veiled slam an item 2 or 3 times and make something really cool with new mods, because that's something relevant to your second or third build of the league, probably. So there's none of those changes are all great. They're all excellent. None of them are a hook. None of them are something that draws your average player in unless they already have a reason to play for a week and then start a second build with a budget or something like that.
And if you couldn't get invested on day one or early on it as well, then that just magnifies that problem. Like it takes you longer to get there, or maybe you don't get there. So I think is what a lot of people are getting into as well.
And even more so if you're one of those people that plays the same build over and over, and maybe you played the same build last league, and now you're looking to like perfect it and be even better. I mean, bad news. Like it's never going to be as good as it was last league, probably for the average player. So,
oh no,
those people probably got pretty discouraged too. That their character, no matter what, as a baseline, is just going to be worse, regardless of whether their skill got nerfed or whatnot.
If our concerns are founded here, and if this league sort of starts to peter out a little bit as a result of the somewhat flubbed league launch and the fact that, you know, the mechanic is fairly similar to previous ones and all of basically everything we just said, I worry that that may be interpreted by GGG as, oh, revamping old league content doesn't really work to draw in players. Because revamping old league content, in my opinion, is very important to the long-term health of the game. But if this league doesn't do well in that context, we might not see a revisit of this kind of thing, you know?
It's so frustrating. They do this shit all the time. And the perfect example of that was racing and like events where they would not market it, not talk about it, only mention it once over the course of a month. Nobody like would be genuinely interested because there's just no way to feasibly participate in this thing, and then they would go, oh, it just doesn't work, lol, like we're just not gonna do it again because it doesn't work. Like I beg that they don't treat it the same way this time around, because this I think what they did, it was great, but the way it was handled at the end with all the issues was not so much, unfortunately. But I think that's a super strong point, Octavian.
One thing which was really interesting about the whole, like, oh, there's no bullshit monsters, but it's, like, crazy overtuned. Well, I feel like that's the result of it. Because they've purposely designed it without, like, on-death effects like this and whatever, the only way they can actually make it challenging to players is just be, like, all of the mobs, all the survivability, all of the damage.
I feel like they could have leaned further into the hazards, if they, you know, as opposed to stacking 20 rare monsters in a wave, or that's maybe an exaggeration, but you know, even like 10, you could make things like Ruin more dangerous. You could make things like I click Ruin basically every time, but I'd be much less likely to click Ruin every time if, for instance, Ruin also caused me to take increased damage when I had stacks of it. And I'd be much less likely to click the Flamey Skulls every time if they like fired in a Nova when they were at max range, like max level. Like you can make those things much more dangerous than they currently are, and that would allow you to then cut back on the number of rare monsters showing up in the ultimatums, and have it still be a challenge.
To choose
I think it would have contributed in large part to making the mechanic feel more distinct from things like Ritual as well. You know?
Yeah.
Like it would be less about the monsters in a circle and more about the hazards in the circle, I guess.
The thing is, I feel like there's a lot about the mechanic that I don't still... It seems so simple and so familiar, and you just run around in circles, and so similar to Ritual, but simultaneously I still see things that surprise me. Like for instance, yesterday I was doing the Stalker one, and apparently that thing like invades a mob and then detonates it. And that was the first time that I've ever seen it. And it like hit me for 6k damage, and I almost died. And I was like, wait, that's a thing that exists? I've never noticed that. Most of the time the blue guy just doesn't load in. But I feel like there's a lot of those sort of attacks that I just don't see.
Behind the wall of monsters. Exactly. Yeah. If you make the hazards more dangerous and reduce the monsters, then you can see the hazards, and it's more about skillfully evading them than it is about, oh, okay, well that exists.
I mean, this is the same issue we had in Heist, where it's all about just more rares, more auras, stacked behind doors. You know, like they stall you behind a door, why not throw a boss in there? Like, and then you kill the guy and then you move on. Like, that's how you get out.
But I don't know, the aura stacking issue, it's just such a cheap solution for difficulty, and they've been doing it for such a long time now. I really wish they just wouldn't. You know, I don't know, maybe because Ritual was really the absolute opposite, where Ritual was never threatening. Maybe if you didn't have Chaos Res and it was the Chaos one, that one would do something. But outside of that, never. I just never felt threatened in that. And here, yeah, you stop for a second and it just really ramps up real quick.
I mean, in Rituals too, the hazards just weren't a thing eventually. Like, as you said, if your Chaos Res is bad, you cared about that, and maybe you were afraid of murder ghosts in haunted rituals. And that's kind of it. Like every other ritual, it didn't matter. Like, I guess that's why I want this change, or why I would have preferred the mechanic implemented this way, because it's a cool idea that you build this arena that you have to avoid the hazards in, and it really hasn't delivered on that. It's instead you're just clicking the things that have the least likelihood to randomly hit you because you can't see them in the flood of monsters.
Oh, and just in case anybody from GGG is listening to this and they're like, well, yeah, we told you guys the only way to kill players is through on-death effects. I thought the thing that Ziggy mentioned with like the different ultimatums zoning the player and putting more emphasis on positioning without having to be like chased down by hasted mobs and whatnot, I think that makes a lot of sense. Those skulls, they do a lot of damage. You misposition a little bit on the lightning, with the T3, it can do a lot of damage. I just never feel like I'm in a situation where I'm like, oh no, do I choose this T3 and risk my character? or do I just like choose something else? No, usually when I'm like, oh, there's tier 3 skulls, I'm just like, I'm gonna take the tier 1 ruin instead, and it doesn't do anything. So
You combine
I
that with
it
like
could have been done.
mobs with strong signaled skills that do a lot of damage but have good signaling, and you've got like a really fun, engaging piece of gameplay
Yes.
going on.
Also, the shrink the arena one is so it's so wimpy. It barely shrinks it. It's still a good sized arena. It should shrink it twice as much.
It's
Or it should
beneficial.
shrink it, and then if you step outside the arena, you
Yeah.
gain doom every half second. So you lose faster if you leave the arena. You
I
have to
love
stay
that
in
one.
it. The way it even sounds like you're not supposed to leave the arena when you choose the shrink the arena one. He's like, step outside the circle and find pain. No, step outside the circle and find a short timer to go back inside the circle.
No, you get banned. That's what the pain is. You step outside the circle, you get banned.
I think
like
they
the
can
league
accomplish
mechanic.
that difficulty by ramping up, like, the positioning mechanics and putting more emphasis on actual gameplay rather than running around in circles, being chased
Yeah.
down by rares.
No, I'm definitely not advocating for making this mechanic a pushover. I want it to be difficult in ways that make it more unique and interesting. Like I don't want to just breeze through them without thinking. I want to think about how to deal with the area mechanics under my feet that are unique to this mechanic. I don't want to think about how to deal with big pack of rare monsters, because big pack of rare monsters is in Legion. Big pack of rare monsters is, to a lesser degree, in Ritual. Big pack of rare monsters is in Beyond. It's in Delirium. I already have had to think about how to deal with big pack of rare monsters. I want different problem to solve from this mechanic.
Yeah, I like how difficult it is, but I don't like the way the difficulty is done.
Right.
Where it is just kind of like running in circles with your eyes closed, hoping that you don't get hit by stuff that you can't see.
I don't think there's enough options either.
This league shouldn't have happened after Ritual. I think it's a cool league, but like it happening directly after Ritual and like kind of showing the same problems. I don't know. All right, I'm gonna preface it with, a lot of the reward stuff is kind of a personal experience, because when this question got brought up in Ritual, and you guys were like, "Oh, Ritual, such great rewards," I was like, "Man, I ain't getting shit. I ain't seeing no exalted orbs, none of that." And so it could be that in my case specifically, I have not seen enough sort of build defining stuff. The smart loot, it doesn't feel very smart. And I think the rewards feel good for the wrong reasons, which is, a lot of binding orbs, a lot of scours, a lot of chaos, which enables other mechanics, which is really cool. But in terms of actual things that I feel make a dent in how I want to play the game, personally, I just haven't seen a whole lot. Again, the smart loot seems a lot less smart than what it was in Ritual and Heist. But even though the smart loot was really smart in Heist, I still didn't do Heist. So that speaks to, I guess, the gameplay aspects of Ultimatum, and more so, to the shit talking from the Chaos guy, really, because that's the only reason why I'm doing it most of the time. So yeah, I look forward to seeing all this like wonderful stuff. So far, personally, I haven't seen enough, but I'm really enjoying all the other things that it does enable me to get, and eventually I'll probably get something cool and be like, oh yeah, now it makes all the sense in the world.